And now to a new study signaling a shift in the classroom. According to the Education Department, Latinos, or the Latinx community, will make up nearly 30% of the public school population by 2030. That would make them the second largest group of students in the U.S. public school system. But despite the boom in enrollment, some experts say these students do not have what they need to succeed. Amanda Fernandez joins us now to talk about this. She is the founder and CEO of Latinos for Education. Thank you so much for being here, Amanda. So despite that increase in enrollment, as I just talked about, the National Center for Education Statistics found that Latino or Hispanic students saw greater declines in their standardized test scores, which are a big deal for students, compared to their white counterparts. So talk to us about why exactly that is and if anything can be done about it.
So as you mentioned, we've seen in the neighborhood of around a 5% decline in standardized tests, as we recently saw coming from the nation's scorecard. And so that is cause for alarm. At the same time, these gaps were persistent prior to the pandemic. So while we experienced interrupted learning, these issues were persistent and impacted the Latino community way before the pandemic. So what do we do about that? There are a number of things that school districts can do across the country, as well as families, as well as policymakers. So right now we have one of the biggest inputs of federal dollars and state dollars coming into our schools for pandemic relief. And so we are seeing unprecedented numbers of money coming into our districts. And so there are ways in which school communities can be investing more in supporting Latino students with those federal dollars.
And Amanda, I'm glad you talked about government funding, because we know that public schools rely on state and local funding to operate. But what about states like Texas, where the Latino population makes up more than half of their student population, of their population, but they still tend to rank near the bottom when it comes to student spending. So how might that exactly be impacting Latino students and their ability to succeed in school?
What we typically see in districts that are heavily populated with Latinos is lower numbers of per pupil spending. And so what we need to see is a level of parity for per pupil spending and frankly, increased spending because of the higher needs we have and bigger gaps that we have for Latino students. So in states like Texas and other states where we have high populations of Latinos in districts as well as statewide, we need to see a more equitable funding model so that the supports and services for our students and families are at parity and increased in terms of closing those gaps that we're seeing as a result of the pandemic and even beforehand.
Equitable funding, that's an important point to make. And Amanda, I also want to talk about parents now. I know there's a survey by the National School Choice Week. It shows that 30% of Hispanic or Latino parents are considering full-time homeschooling, another public school outside their home district, or a public charter school. So can you talk to us about the potential benefits and downfalls of that for parents who maybe can't afford to remove their kids from public school? I know I was a product of public schools. What can they do to help their kids succeed?
Right. I was a product of public schools myself. So what we see happening as a result of the pandemic is more parents who have seen more about what the education is that their children are receiving, and they are rethinking what is the best opportunity for my child. And so there is that influence because of the pandemic that more parents are rethinking. At the same time, we have the majority of our students in public schools. And so what parents can be doing is really creating a space in their schools for their input, advocating a space for them to advocate for their own children, as well as the broader school community. We've typically seen in our schools more of a one-way street in terms of the relationship between schools and families. The pandemic has opened up an opportunity for there to actually be a two-way street. And it really is imperative now, given the levels of information that our families need, how to support their children and truly be involved and engaged members of the school community.
So important. Amanda Fernandez, thank you so much.
You're welcome.